Welcome back to Just Books. There's always a moment in every journalist's life when a story that they're sent to report on becomes a much larger subject of investigation, of analysis. It's the journalist's desire to paint a larger canvas and get to the roots of the story. One such remarkable event is of journalist Dionne Bunsha of Mumbai, who works for Frontline magazine, who was sent to cover the Gujarat riots in 2002. And 4 years later, she has come out with an amazing chronicle of the whole story called Scarred: Experiments with Violence in Gujarat. Dionne, it's an astonishing book because it paints not just a picture of that ghastly episode that's a blot on Gujarat and on India in 2002. But again and again, you return to the story to follow each story of each victim, indeed of the perpetrators of the violence, of that terrible carnage in which 1,000 Muslims were killed in organized killings. Right. How did it go from that first piece of reportage to become this large and comprehensive work? Like
you said, I just went there, thinking it would be a 1 or 2 trip kind of assignment, and the kind of stories that I heard in the relief camps and the way the state was reacting to the, the continuing violence just made me feel that here was a story that needed to be told. And the national media did a great job initially, but as the violence continued over 2 or 3 months, the stories were kind of forgotten or dissipated. And in Gujarat, the people I encountered who were not, affected by directly affected by the violence wanted to deny that, this was happening. And I felt that I needed to kind of break that conspiracy of silence and tell the stories of people who were suffering continually, blow after blow.
What was it like for you to keep going back and tracing people like Qutbuddin or Zahira or Amina or the hundreds of people who had watched their lives and their families and their homes destroyed?
It's because I kept going back to meeting these people, and every time I met them, there was some more shocking or bizarre twist in the tale that their lives took. And I just felt that these stories of how there were deliberate attempts to stop people from actually trying to rebuild their lives, and the story of the continuing kind of intimidation that they faced that needed to be told. Like there were people like, say, Nanubai Malek, who had to, who saw all the violence in a place called Naroda Gam, and he was the only witness who actually named 2 top leaders from the VHP and the BJP in his complaint. In a matter of like weeks, his complaint just disappeared from police records, and instead they filed a false case against him for murder, and he was jailed for months on end. And yet despite all the intimidation against him, he persisted with his story, and he wanted those people named. So it's also a tribute to the bravery of these people who I encountered, who despite the odds were fighting for what they believed was right and just fighting to live and rebuild their lives.
What do you think happened to lead to a virtual paralysis of the administration and the police force in Gujarat? You go into it in some detail, to be paralyzed and become completely passive, inactive spectators to these terrible sights of carnage and pogroms that went on.
Right. I wouldn't say that they were passive spectators, they were active connivers. The police actually abetted the violence. There are cases of the policemen giving petrol to the rioters from their jeeps.
To burn people
exactly.
alive.
So I think the police played a very active role in abetting the violence, and that's also because they had the support of their political bosses. And a top police official, Mr. Shri Kumar in Gujarat, has gone on record, he's put an affidavit in court saying that Narendra Modi had a meeting a day before the violence started and told the top police officers to let the mobs vent their anger. So I think you couldn't get a clearer sign of what line the police would take.
Your story goes much beyond the victims and the connivers
Right.
or promoters of the
Right.
violence, people who abetted the
Right.
violence. You also aim to look at the lives of the perpetuators
Yeah.
of the violence.
Right.
How the young men are enrolled into right-wing Hindu organizations like the Bajrang Dal and the VHP and their lives.
Right.
What was that experience like for you to go and attend the shakhas, the whole regimen of indoctrination that these youngsters get into and that leads them to these acts of violence and organized crime?
I just felt that, you know, such mass violence, it can't mean that, you know, there's such a large section of the population that's criminal. They're human beings, and there's some motivation that kind of drove them to this kind of extreme act. And I really wanted to understand, you know, what kind of drove people to this kind of madness.
This hatred.
Exactly. So I went and interviewed one of the main accused in the Naroda Patia case, which is one of the big massacres. His name is Babu Bajrangi, and now we're quite friendly. And he very, you know, there's kind of boasting, there's a kind of machoism involved in telling you, I mean, although he denies any involvement in the riots, he's very proud to tell you of how he still, till today, kidnaps Hindu girls who marry Muslim boys. And, you know, because he feels it's wrong and it's against his religion, and he needs to rescue these girls. So he even made me meet some of those girls who he had apparently rescued. And it's a lot of, I feel a lot of the times people are programmed into believing that, you know, their actions are justified, and the cause that, because it's the cause that they are working for. And I even went to the Bajrang Dal camp where they train young recruits, you know, and kind of indoctrinate them into this line of thinking and make them feel they're kind of protecting their nation from terrorism.
This portrait of
Exactly.
fundamentalists in the making.
Exactly. So there's always this kind of pitting a false enemy to divert attention from the real issues, because actually most of these young boys are unemployed.
What's really very remarkable about your book, because in very simple telling prose, you tell us how everybody, each one of us, can become inflicted by the mob mentality, and that how there is really evil in really some modicum, all of us, which can be provoked and really become concentrated along these lines. Are these very frightening lessons, and why are they peculiar to Gujarat even 5 or 6 years later? Why is there this terrible unease among the two communities? Can it be repaired?
Well, I think it definitely can be repaired if there is a suitable political climate. But today in Gujarat, people benefit from still engendering more intimidation, because the culprits are still roaming freely on the streets. So the only way they can exist today is by continuing with the intimidation. The people who plan the violence, right up to the top political leaders, are still ruling the state. So obviously the intimidation will continue. And even now, like I said, people like Babu Bajrangi are still kidnapping girls, most openly, blatantly. So when there's this kind of political mafia ruling, there's bound to be intimidation.
And what of the victims? The relief camps have been closed down. To what extent have the victims and the families and the minority community been rehabilitated, or efforts being made to reintegrate them, if that is possible? Have they been able to go back to their homes, to their livelihoods?
Most of them have, but there are quite a few who haven't been able to go back. Especially in villages, a lot of people have had to remain in the towns where the relief camps were, and they've set up small colonies in those towns, and they haven't been able to go back to the village.
So in fact what has happened is a greater degree of ghettoization.
Yes, definitely. And even within those small towns, if you notice, the refugees are always on the outskirts of the living on the outskirts of the towns, also because maybe land is cheaper there, more freely available. So even geographically, that ghettoization has taken place, and that kind of leads to less interaction between people, and that mindset of being isolated still continues.
Dionne Bunsha, it's a remarkable book, Scarred: Experiments with Violence in Gujarat. I really urge everyone to read it, and I greatly applaud your effort in staying with the story, as they say in journalism, and producing much more than just a story, but really an extraordinary document. Thank you so much for being on Just Books.
Thank you.
That's all for now, but I'll be back next weekend with another edition of Just Books. Until then, from all of us here at NDTV Profit, goodbye.